Okay, here we are. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the show. I'm Mary Grace, and the fun has already started. You guys just weren't in on it, but this is this is Conspiracy of Truth with Mary Grace. That's me, and Dave over there. Dave Hayes, also known as Praying Medic. We are going to have a conversation, which is what we always do on this show. This is Mary Grace TV on the Mary Grace Media Network. And Dave and I are friends. We've been friends for a long time. And he and his lovely wife are actually very good friends of mine. And so sometimes we have conversations and we have them on air like this so that you can take part. And that's what we're doing here. It's not an interview. It's just a conversation. We're talking about stuff that the news won't tell you, that Conservative Inc. won't tell you, that maybe you're thinking about, wondering about what's going on. How does this work? We don't have a scripted conversation. We just go over different topics as they come to mind. And so we invite you to join along. If you are on Facebook, if you're on YouTube, Rumble, Twitter, also known as X. We are on all of those platforms. And to my YouTube audience, I do want to encourage you to get signed up for those other platforms that are less inclined to get their nose out of joint if we say words that they don't like. And so, we're not telling you that we're not ending our relationship with YouTube. We're just telling you that it's complicated. So it's better if you watch us on those other places to make sure that you get every show. I had a show with Clay Clark the other day. We didn't even fire up the YouTubes for obvious reasons. So join us here today. Let everybody know that we are live. Facebook is having some issues with me lately. I don't know what I did to upset them, but they are not happy with me and their algorithm is showing it. And so if you're on Facebook, please do us a favor and hit the like, hit the hearts, share, leave a comment, whether it's live or after the fact. We've got to kind of juice things up on Facebook, give them some love. I don't know who's having a bad time over there, but they're taking it out on Mary Grace. So let's just get it going. Okay. So Dave, it's good to have you here. Very, very happy to have you. Thank you for being here. We tend to do these conversations about, I don't know, once every fortnight or month, depending on if we can get the schedule coordinated. And so as always, it feels like a year has gone by in terms of the news cycles, even though it's been less than a month since we talked. It's just, yeah, never a dull moment, never a dull moment. And you have so many things that you're working on. I have so many things I'm working on. I don't know where to start, but I do have one idea. All right, but how are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. Thanks for having me back on the show. Always a pleasure to be here talking about current events, news,
Yes.
and what God is doing. And I can confirm that Facebook does not like you.
What did they
The
do?
last broadcast that we did, I shared it on my Facebook page.
Oh
There was
no.
no engagement, no comments, no like. I don't think anybody saw it. I'm like, okay. So I did share it today,
Yeah.
and I shared it out on Twitter. Twitter is not is almost as bad as Facebook when it comes to live stream because nobody
I-
sees the live streams on
Yeah, I,
Twitter.
I mean, I think they have me restricted somehow. And here's the thing. I was actually trying to set up a new Facebook page the other day for somebody on a completely unrelated matter, like a business page. And I tried through two separate business accounts. And I get through the process and I hit done. And then it says, you can't do this. You're restricted. And I'm like, but why? And then you ask, you try to ask somebody, and there is no human being with whom to engage at Facebook. Anytime I send them a message, it goes to their ad center, which I'm not even trying to run ads. And God forbid that I would do that. But it's just so strange. And I still, it tells me that I'm restricted based on rejected ads since February. And I'm like, but why? And so, yeah, they're just not happy. And so if you're seeing puppy dogs on my Facebook page, there's a reason for that. Like I said, I'm trying to give them some love. Um, so anyway, yeah. It's just that's the way it is. But still, please share it because sometimes we manage to unlock the algorithm. I don't know what the key is. I know that there's a lot of spiritual warfare around it. So just keep going, guys. Don't give up because there's a lot of people on Facebook that still need to hear what we have to say. Dave, I know where I want to start. I do know. I want to start with what's going on with President Trump with all of the trials and all of the circus that they're calling trials and juries and things like that. But I want to talk specifically about the precedent that is being set for future actions against actual traitors to the country. And this has to do with what Ivan Raiklin has been talking about on Twitter mainly. He's going to be on the show tomorrow. And so can you kind of fill people in on that and then segue into the precedent part of it?
Yeah. So there's a lot going on with President Trump and the persecutions, prosecutions, whatever you want to call them. And there's also not a lot going on in some respects. So real quick rundown on the classified documents case, which of course President Trump, as the highest classifying authority, has the right to obtain and retain and declassify any documents he wants at any time in any manner he wants. So this is what a lot of people don't understand. The president, as the ultimate classification or classifying authority, can classify anything he wants. He can declassify anything he wants. And he doesn't have to make an official proclamation that something has been declassified. That's the thing that a lot of people can't wrap their brain around. And I see lefties having problems with this on Twitter, especially, where they say, well, Trump didn't officially write some document where he proclaimed that all these other documents are declassified. Like, well, actually he did.
He put it on Twitter.
You and I and Q and a number of millions of other people saw Trump on Twitter say, I hereby declassify all documents related to the Mueller witch hunt, related to the illegal surveillance of my campaign. That's everything related to, the surveillance of the Trump campaign, the Mueller investigation, everything. He did it twice. And he said it. I think he may have said it in some rallies or campaigns too. So people don't understand. Like, but not those documents that are in that box over there. He didn't declassify those because they still have classified markings on them. They can't be declassified. So there's just there are some people who they're having this. They're having. They have a little bit of mental problem understanding what it means to have declassification authority. And the nice thing about this trial in Florida is that the judge in that case, Judge Cannon, is actually a fair judge. She sees through the games and the tricks that Jack Smith, the prosecutor, has been playing, and he has done what a lot of dirty prosecutors do. They file motions and they bring evidence to the court, and then they demand that it be sealed so that the public can't get access to it. And oftentimes when attorneys or prosecutors do that, it's something that they would be very embarrassed if the public found out about it. And what we're finding out is that Judge Cannon is unsealing a lot of these motions, unsealing some of the testimony, unsealing some of the evidence that has been presented in this case. And we're finding out that the FBI DOJ and the prosecutor have tampered with the evidence. The documents in the folders that they got from Trump in this case, they're supposed to preserve those documents to the best of their ability. That's how you handle evidence. You don't unnecessarily move, rearrange, change the presentation, the position of bits of evidence. You leave it intact as it is. You photograph it. You record everything you can about the way it was found. And what we're finding out now is that they moved documents, inserted face sheets in folders, inserted other placekeepers inside of boxes and folders that Trump didn't have in there, and then they photographed these boxes and presented it to the public as if this is how we found it. They put boxes in a bathroom and photographed these boxes stacked up in a bathroom as if that's how Trump had them stored. And we're finding out through the unsealing of these documents that there was a lot of misrepresentation and mishandling of the evidence.
Well, and also,
so hang on. So now
yeah.
Judge Cannon has scheduled hearings to determine if the prosecution has mishandled evidence, number one. Number two, there's all this evidence we now know that not just Fani Willis and other prosecutors, Bragg, but people on the prosecution team in Florida all colluded with, met with White House counsel before any of this started. And so Judge Cannon has docketed a hearing to determine what is the scope of the prosecution team. Who is on the prosecution team? Does it include NARA? Does it include the White House? Does it include the National Security Council? Who else is involved in the prosecution team? It's not unusual for the government to bring in, let's say the Department of Justice is prosecuting a case that has to do with tax fraud. Okay, when the DOJ brings this case to court, they're going to include on the prosecution team someone from the IRS. If it's a tax fraud case, they need someone from the IRS who has intimate internal knowledge of what was going on with the tax claims and all that. If they're prosecuting some other case, maybe that has to do with espionage related to nuclear material, they're going to include someone from Department of Energy as part of the prosecution team. So they'll bring in experts as part of the prosecution team. That's normal. But in this case, Judge Cannon needs to know who are the experts, who are the people who are on the prosecution team, and does it include White House counsel? And if it does, we need to know, because if the White House was involved in the prosecution, then that has a reflection on Trump's claims that this is all, political persecution. So that's, and Judge Cannon has put on hold all of the proceedings related to Trump, and she has now actually put Jack Smith on trial for a while. I don't think this case, Trump's case in Florida, is going to go to a jury prior to the November election. I just don't see that happening because it's going to take a while for the Supreme Court and the DC Circuit Court to make a ruling on immunity, and that immunity is probably going to have some impact on Trump's case in Florida. Go ahead.
It's almost like their plans are falling apart and turning back on them, their evil plans. I mean, look what happened to Fani Willis, to Cash, Cash Money G. She, things are falling apart on her. They're falling apart on Jack Smith. And one of the things too, I think about the documents case is that there is enough evidence to believe that what the DOJ is really after, what the deep state is really after, is the unredacted, declassified documentation around Russiagate, around Crossfire Hurricane, around these actions that were taken by a corrupt DOJ and FBI starting as early as 2015, to try to sabotage and eventually remove Trump from office. And a lot of this centers around General Flynn's case and what they did to him. And this is interesting because Ivan Raiklin, he was on my show back in 2021 talking about the certification of the ballots, and what Pence could have done on January 6th. He explained that rather well. He's I think a retired colonel, also has a legal background. Um,
Yeah,
he
his specialty is constitutional law.
Yeah, so he went viral on Twitter over the past couple of days talking about this and talking about, what he calls, I think it's the deep state hit list. Is that what it's called? The deep something
Yeah.
where he's gonna
Yeah.
take them out. And, he's actually gonna be here on the show tomorrow at 1, so I encourage everybody to mark your calendars because that's gonna be a very interesting conversation. He has an encyclopedic knowledge and understanding of all of the players, the sequence of events, but he's very good at articulating it, in a way that a layperson can understand. And he has an entire wall. I call it the wall of shame, but it's, it's a everything is spelled out sequentially, of all of these cases. But going back to the documents and to the Trump cases, they're very much related. And when you talk about setting precedent, one of the things that Ivan Raiklin is talking about is circumventing the DOJ in a way that is legal and constitutional, and using local county level law enforcement to go and do exactly what was done to President Trump, Roger Stone, Peter Navarro, and that is to do these pre-dawn raids on the people who we have seen over and over again who have managed to skirt justice and do whatever they wanted, and to apply the two-tiered justice system to the people, including our president. And so it's very interesting what he's talking about. If you are on X, I encourage you to go and look back on a video that he posted 2 days ago, where he actually recorded a conversation that he was having with a reporter from a show called All Things Considered. It was an it was an impromptu conversation about 20 minutes where he just walked her through everything that has happened and all of the ways that the players are connected. That's a good way to do your homework before you listen in tomorrow. And also, I recommend that if you haven't done it, that you go and download the Flynn movie and watch that, because that is going to give you insight as well. It's right here up on the screen. You can go there and get the download. Promo code is Mary Grace. Go there and watch that and do your homework before tomorrow's show. It's really going to help. And the reason that it's so important for people to understand this, I know that people feel like nothing's going to happen. Even when Trump gets back in, the DOJ is still corrupt. They're not going to help him, blah, 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 blah. What Ivan is talking about really has nothing to do with this DOJ, except for the fact that we're going to be going after those people too. So those people have a lot to fear based on what he's saying, because they are corrupt actors. And I don't mean TV actors. I don't mean movie actors. I mean like bad people. That's how we're using that term. Okay. These are real people doing real things. They're not actors. They're not stand-ins. They're people who have committed crimes of treason against this country. That's what Ivan is talking about, going after those people. So precedent, when it comes to precedent, this is what we're looking at, because we have precedent that is being set, which is that these corrupt individuals are going after people and sort of breaking all the rules that we thought were sacrosanct in terms of leaving certain people alone. Well, they've opened up Pandora's box. And so that leaves one choice, which is that we, the people, are going to open a can of whoop ass on them. Basically, that's what Ivan is talking about.
Yep.
I mean, is there anything
Yep.
I left out?
No, except you put that in between two other topics I wanted to talk about first before we talk
Okay,
about
good. All right, well, let's back up.
and that is the rest of the Trump cases. I was going to do like, here's what's going on in
Really?
Florida, here's what's
Okay,
happening in Georgia, DC, New York, then let's talk about precedent, but that's okay.
I'll talk about it again when you're
No,
done.
that's fine.
Sorry.
I live with Denise, and her ADD sometimes gets her like she wants to talk about something
I
now
just
before
couldn't
she
wait.
forgets about it. And I'm like, okay, I get it. But eventually we're going to get back around to the others.
I couldn't wait.
So let's talk about Georgia real quick.
You're so methodical, and that's why we have you here.
Yeah, I like to stay on task if I can. I mean, I have some of my best friends, they're ADD as hell. They drive me a little crazy, but I'm always the one who's like, okay, yep, I got that. Yep, I see that. Yep, but we have to do this. Let's just keep going.
Okay.
Okay, ping pong balls. So let's talk about Georgia real quick. We have a similar situation going on in Georgia. The prosecutor is now going to be on trial. So Fannie Willis, in the Trump case in Georgia, the trial judge decided to remove one of the prosecutors, Wade, from the case and left Fannie Willis on the case. And Trump has appealed that ruling to the Georgia Court of Appeals. They've accepted the appeal. And so they're going to hear Trump's attorneys will go in and present the case for her removal from the case as a prosecutor.
So good.
All right. So that's going to take a couple of months, potentially 2 or 3 months. I'm not sure when that case is docketed, but they'll submit briefs, they'll give oral arguments, and then the court will have to take some time and figure out what's going to happen. That Trump case cannot go forward until the Georgia Court of Appeals decides if she gets removed from the case, and whoever loses that case is probably going to appeal it. So I don't think that Georgia case is going to go to trial anytime soon.
So good.
If Trump loses and Fannie Willis is left on the case, he'll probably appeal that ruling to potentially to SCOTUS. I mean, we don't know. But they can't move that case forward until they have a final decision on that. I don't think Georgia goes anywhere. And now Fannie Willis is in the batter's box. So, hey, grab some popcorn. Let's switch to D.C. real quick. In D.C., the case that involves President Trump in January 6th, where he's accused of inciting insurrection, trying to overtake the country when he was still president, all this other stuff. Big problem there is that Judge Chutkan can't move that case forward to trial until the immunity question is resolved. So they presented oral arguments on presidential immunity before Supreme Court. Supreme Court has to issue a ruling, and that'll probably come before the end of June. The end of the Supreme Court session comes at the end of June. I would imagine they'll have a ruling by then. That ruling then has to go down to Judge Chutkan and the DC Circuit Court. It's likely that the DC Circuit Court is going to have to redo their crappy ruling. What Judge Chutkan should have done is she should have looked at the charges that are brought against Trump and decided which ones are subject to presidential immunity and which ones are not. Some of the acts are official acts and some of them are private acts. And what we've always understood is that a president has immunity from both civil and criminal liability for official acts, not private acts, but official acts. And Judge Chutkan didn't make that distinction, and neither did the DC Court of Appeals. So it goes to SCOTUS. It looks like there may be an 8-1, maybe a 7-2. It could be a unanimous decision from SCOTUS. But of course, the president does have immunity for official acts, right? But they're going to send that back down, and then Judge Chutkan or DC Circuit Court are going to have to decide which of the charges brought against Trump are covered under official acts and immune to prosecution and which ones are not. So if let's say that the Supreme Court just remands it back to the trial court and it goes back to Judge Chutkin, and she then has to have a hearing, and this is a pre-trial hearing where she has to allow the Trump's attorneys and the prosecution to debate which of the charges are covered under presidential immunity and which ones are not. She then needs to make a ruling. If she makes the wrong ruling, that ruling can be appealed to DC Circuit and then back to SCOTUS. She should have made this ruling 4 months ago, but she didn't. She decided he doesn't get any immunity at all. And now Supreme Court is going to say, well, actually, no, president does have immunity, and you have to decide which counts are covered under immunity and which counts are not. So if she rules the wrong way, it could go to DC Circuit Court, and it could go back to SCOTUS. That case is not going anywhere. That's all before this case goes to trial. They have to decide which charges are covered under immunity and which ones are not. So I don't see that case going to trial before November. This is not going to happen.
This is what they get for waiting 3 years to bring these
charges. I know.
It's dumb.
Federal cases like this typically take 1.5 years to go to trial. They tried to shoehorn this thing in before the election, and that all the attorneys who know anything about federal criminal prosecution are saying there's no way this case is not going to trial. It's not going to go to a jury before the election. They should have brought it 1.5 years ago, and maybe they would get it. But with all the appeals, this is one of those cases that would probably take, in the normal course of action, 3 or 4 years to get to trial, because of all the legal ins and outs of immunity and all the other stuff.
So I think they were trying to win it in the court of public opinion, which is why they brought it now, right?
They know that they don't have any actual evidence that would convict Trump of a crime.
Right.
This is primarily so that CNN and MSNBC can have some talking points every day. Oh, Trump is in another criminal trial. He's been indicted again, to try to smear Trump in the public's mind. That's really what this is all about.
How's that working out?
Holy cats, not so well.
Yeah, let's come back to
that. That brings us to the shenanigans involving Trump's former attorney, Michael Cohen, this week.
Poor Michael.
Oh my gosh. You can't make this stuff up.
Bless his heart.
So if you haven't been paying attention to the 3-ring circus going on courtesy of Alvin Bragg in this New York case against Trump, where Trump supposedly paid some kind of hush money to Stormy Daniels. I don't even know where to begin with this case. It's just so ridiculous. So first of all, it's a well-known, well-established practice that if you're a famous person and you are trying to accomplish something significant in the public eye, it's known that you're gonna face accusers, people who are just going to come out of the blue and accuse you of doing some kind of sexual impropriety or something illicit against them, and they're then going to demand that you give them some money so they could, and they'll sign an NDA, non-disclosure agreement, so that they can't talk about it. And this is a grift that many people have used over the years just to get money from wealthy people. And there's oftentimes no basis to the claims at all. In fact, a lot of people don't know this, but Congress has a fund that you and I pay for that is used to basically pay off hush money to accusers of members of Congress who just want to make a little money. And any member of Congress who is accused of any kind of untoward activity or illicit activity, they can submit a request and have this fund pay the accuser money to shut them up and get them to sign a non-disclosure agreement. That's actually there's a fund in Congress just for that. So it's not a big deal to the adults in the room who know that there are grifters out there who just want to make money off of wealthy, famous people. And so there is this accusation by Stormy Daniels that she had an affair with Trump. And then she demanded that he pay her money so she would shut up and not talk about it. So whether there was an affair or not isn't really at issue. The issue is that the prosecution is claiming, this is what they're claiming. They're claiming that in 2017, okay, after the 2016 election, in 2017, that Michael Cohen paid Stormy Daniels some hush money to keep her quiet about an affair she supposedly had with Trump years ago. And here's the essence of that allegation. Cohen has said in writing and in oral testimony that he used his own money to pay Stormy Daniels more than $100,000 to keep her quiet. And his testimony is he didn't ask Trump for the money. He didn't ask the Trump campaign for the money. He didn't ask anyone associated with Trump for the money. He took out a home equity line of credit against his own house, his own mortgage, and got that money and paid Stormy Daniels and never asked Trump for reimbursement and didn't tell Trump about it. So the question is, how is this Trump's problem if this is something that, if it's an action that Cohen took of his own volition, used his own money? He even said he didn't tell his wife about it and he didn't take it out of his personal savings or checking account because she would have found out about it. So he took out a HELOC loan that she didn't know about to pay this money to Stormy Daniels. Okay.
Not suspicious at all.
This was in 2017.
Yeah.
Now, what Alvin Bragg is accusing Trump of is he's saying Trump tried to conceal this payment made in 2017 to further his election campaign, which was in 2016. Now, I ask you, if Trump was in a campaign, election campaign in 2016, and he won the election in 2016, how does a payment in 2017 further his chances of being elected? It doesn't. But that's literally what Bragg is accusing Trump of. He's accusing him of hiding a payment from 2017 in 2016 that hasn't been paid yet. And that's why all these legal experts are scratching their heads going, there is no crime here. Trump didn't do anything wrong. There's no crime. This is just the most ridiculous theory of legal theory ever.
There's no there.
And so Cohen blows up the prosecution's case this week on Thursday by telling this story about a phone call that he had with an attorney. And he claimed that this phone call was about the hush money payment made to Stormy Daniels. Here's the problem. They subpoenaed because Cohen is making representations about a phone call that he made. Trump's attorneys subpoenaed Cohen's phone records. And they got his text messages and his phone calls. And they have a record, a timeline. So Trump's attorney is going through the timeline that day when Cohen supposedly had this phone call with an attorney about Stormy Daniels. It turns out, so they're going through the timeline. He says, okay, well, here it is. It's, whatever time it was, 6:45. You received this phone call, and it's an 8-minute phone call, and it looks like that's a prank phone call. And Cohen goes, yeah, that was a prank phone call. Some 14-year-old kid was punking me about something. And he says, okay, then this next phone call, you call this attorney, or he called you, and you talked about the prank phone call that you just had a few minutes ago. He goes, yeah, I talked to so-and-so attorney. We talked about this prank phone call. And he says that's true, a true and correct statement. This phone call you had to this attorney was about the prank phone call you just had 10 minutes earlier. And Cohen says, yes, that's what the phone call was about. And then Trump's attorney says, okay, well, that's not what you previously testified to. Your previous testimony is that that phone call was about the hush money paid to Stormy Daniels. Now you're saying that phone call was about a prank phone call you had 10 minutes earlier. Which one is it? And and I wasn't there. I didn't. It's not broadcast, but even Anderson Cooper and members of the lefty media were losing their minds over the fact that Cohen comes out and gets caught in a lie. Trump's attorney turns him inside out, proves him yet again to be a liar, and pretty much just blew the prosecution's entire case because he perjured himself again and is lying. So I think in the New York case, I suspect there's one juror in those mostly liberal jurors. One of them is probably going to have enough. I think one's going to have enough integrity to see through this case and vote to exonerate Trump. And if one juror does not vote to convict, it's a hung jury, and I think that's what's going to happen.
It's so interesting. I mean, especially because Michael Cohen is known to be a liar. I mean, this isn't the first time we've seen this.
Convicted perjurer, and it's not easy to get convicted of perjury.
He's already. Isn't he wearing an ankle monitor?
Lied to the DOJ, just lied to the jury here.
Isn't he like on release? I mean, he's still sort of in prison. I mean,
he's on probation. He might be. Oh, here's another one. So Trump's attorney asks. Apparently, Trump's attorney, I forget his name. He was playing clips from Cohen's podcast in court, and so Trump's attorney asks Cohen,
entertaining.
Prior to the beginning of this case, had you ever talked to Alvin Bragg? And Cohen says no to the jury. He says, no, I've never talked to him prior to this case. He says, okay, roll clip number 6. And it's Cohen's podcast where Cohen is talking about how many times he talked to Alvin Bragg, on what occasions he talked to him, and what they talked about prior to the case. Just like, wow. Dude, if you're going to be a liar, you have to remember your lies when you get questioned about it.
And Alvin Bragg is probably like trying to hide under the desk. I think it was last week? Was it last week in the Jersey rally that Trump called him Fat Albert? Was that? He's called him Fat Alvin before, but I think he called him Fat Albert. I mean, it's so funny. How about that rally? 80,000 people. It's crazy. Okay, keep going.
107,000 people.
Yeah, Clay Clark said there were about 80,000 that were in the limits of where
in the confines of the of the auditorium or
and
arena,
probably another 30,000 that couldn't actually get in.
Yeah, the city officials the day of the rally said estimated 100,000 people were there, and then Trump said, I think last night he was in Minnesota. He said there was 107,000 people according to the official report. So I don't know. That's a lot of dang people in Jersey, Philly, New York.
Yeah.
Trump thinks that they're all in play. Yeah. And he's going for them. He thinks Minnesota's in play too. You know, Trump only lost Minnesota by like a point and a half in 2016.
It doesn't surprise me. You know, I think Virginia's in play too. I think
Virginia is definitely in play.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we saw what happened. Virginia was one of the states that they called super early for what's his name, Biden, for that guy, and that was actually what prompted me to go live that night, and I stayed on for all night, really, just because everything that was unfolding was just so unbelievable. But it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, he's talking about having a rally in Brooklyn, and there was a video that came out yesterday.
He's got a rally booked in Brooklyn for
what day is it?
I think it's the 26th of May, I believe.
Okay, so Memorial Day weekend. Yeah, and you know, they were doing Newsweek, Newsmax was doing man on the street interviews, person, woman, man on the street, and you know, Brooklyn is highly diverse, lots of Blacks, Hispanics, you know, really very mixed population, and these people were so gung ho about a Trump rally. They were all saying, yeah, we're going to
Yeah,
go. We love Trump. We're going to bring people with us. It was really encouraging to see. And I do hope that he comes out to Madison Square Garden. I mean, that will be just the
that would
tip
be
of
epic.
that would be tippy top. Yeah.
That would
I
be epic.
mean, I think it would be so good. And of course, they're going to try everything they can to prevent it from happening.
You know what? I think Virginia's in play
Why? Why do you think?
because Northern Virginia has some of the most wealthy communities in the country. And I know those wealthy people in Northern Virginia are aware of Biden's plan to increase the federal income tax on the highest earners to 49% and a 25% tax on unrealized capital gains. And that is a huge deal for people who have a lot of money because it's one thing to pay capital gains on an investment when you cash it out, when you when you realize that the gain on your capital, it's taxed. But the tax on unrealized capital gains means if you have an account that happens to earn a lot of money and you don't do anything with that money, it's still in the account, you have to pay the capital gains that year. As it accrues, you're
Crazy.
going to be continually paying capital gains tax, and that is going to piss off a lot of the wealthy people in this country, and a lot of those people live in Northern Virginia.
Yeah.
This is a part of Biden's proposed budget. I don't know what the Biden administration means by budget. We haven't had an actual budget in this country in 25 years, probably. But
It's
that's
yeah.
one of the taxes that Biden is proposing, and that's going to hurt a lot of people if it goes through.
And the belt, yeah, the entire Northern Virginia Beltway area it's mostly federal workers and contractors,
Right.
and foreign workers. But it's interesting too because up in that area is Loudoun County, which is where the real controversy over the transgender bathrooms and the attacks on girls has surfaced. And that's one of the things that brought Youngkin over the line to be governor, as a Republican governor in Virginia, because of the way that was being handled. And that is, I think, the wealthiest school district in the country, if I'm not mistaken. It's in the top 5, if it's not the wealthiest. And that is very interesting because there are a lot of immigrants in that area, high net worth, high earning immigrants, and they handpick that county and that school district. And the backlash over what was happening at that time when Youngkin got elected, and it continues because of how poorly it was handled. And I think that is having a trickle down or trickle across Northern Virginia effect, whether they want to keep it hush hush or not. It's that cat is out of the bag. And, no matter, I don't think, like, no matter how progressive you are, you don't want your teenage daughter being raped by a boy who comes into the girls' bathroom wearing a skirt and having
Right.
the school covering up for it. That's a bridge too far. So it's very interesting.
There's a lot of I'm concerned that I'm concerned about what the Democrats might do when it becomes very clear and very plain to everyone that they're not going to win this election with Joe Biden as their candidate. Right now, Bill Maher is actually talking about, hey, like it's pretty clear that Biden's not the guy. Like, he's not going to get us over the line in November. Like, can we switch out right now? Can we get another candidate? I mean, they're talking about that now.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So go ahead.
Precedent. I haven't forgotten.
Precedent.
Okay.
All right. Let's shift to precedent then.
Yeah, and we can come back to talking about Biden as the candidate. I'll jot that down so I don't forget.
Yeah. Well, I guess all I would say about that is this all becomes a lot of unknowns as we move toward November. do they try to switch out Biden for some other candidate after the convention, right? So we've theorized for a long time that what they're going to do is they froze out RFK Jr. and every other Democrat or liberal candidate because they wanted to have total control over the process. And the theory was they get Biden into the convention, they get the nomination, and then something happens to Biden after the convention, whether he gets sick, he gets 187, something unexpected happens to him, and then the Democrats can then choose the candidate they want. That's how they have their rules structured. There's no vote. They just choose the candidate they want, right? So I think that's how they set up the system. I suspect they're going to try to switch out the candidate after the election. And then there's this question of, well, if their other candidate is just as bad or worse than Biden, do they do something to cancel the election altogether?
Right. I mean, they're working on the bird flu. So the election flu is on the table, I think. But I feel like people are kind of over it. I mean, monkeypox, bird flu, getting into cows. I think
that card is a card that can only be played once. They played it,
yeah,
and they woke up way too many people. I don't think it's going to work for them to play it again.
Yeah, I think it's over. I don't know. I mean, and I also think that, when they activated Antifa and their paid mercenaries to do these college demonstrations around the country, the pro-Palestinian terrorist marches, I think they overplayed their hand too soon on that. And that really got the kibosh when the frat boys went out and started making fun of them. I think it's really shown how far we've come as a people, because 4 years ago or 8 years ago, people were so intimidated by these thugs, and people, where people were afraid to go to rallies. They were being accused of being the violent ones, and so now it's turned on its head. And these guys are just out there making fun of them. They're playing the national anthem on blast in the middle of the night when they're trying to sleep in their tent cities that they've set up to blockade these campuses.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the way. That to me.
Hey, you know what? For every insurgency, there's a counterinsurgency. And
Yeah.
the frat boys were going to be the counterinsurgents.
Yeah, and it has to be that way. And these guys really set the example for the rest of us, And this is actually, no, I'm going to rephrase that. The Anons and the meme makers set the example. But the frat boys took it mainstream because, the Anons and the meme artists have been doing this since day one. And that is what has crushed the Democrats, because we've been able to meme them into oblivion, but it's jumped from social media into real life now. And so it's the perfect meme. It's memes come to life.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah.
It is. And law enforcement has responded well too. Unlike in 2020, when law enforcement was like, "Oh crap, what do we do? Like, if the press sees us, taking
Pushing
these
back.
people into custody, how are we going to be perceived? Are we going to be slandered by the media?" I'll tell you, down in Texas, they're not playing. Holy cats! The freaking state troopers came out and just started rounding these morons up and cuffing them and stuffing them and carrying them into the cars. And like, okay, well,
is that the one where the guy was carrying this
up that
like
one long-haired moron and dragged
like a toddler?
him across the freaking, yeah.
It's like a toddler in the grocery store. Yeah, I mean, that was the temper tantrum to end all temper tantrums. And the guy was just like, "Yeah, no, I got kids that are, more ridiculous than you. This is nothing. This is nothing to me." I think this is good.
They set up another Chaz in Seattle, and it's still there. They have another. Oh yes, they have another autonomous zone in downtown Seattle.
Really?
And they're not allowing law enforcement to do anything to intervene in the autonomous zone that has been set up in Seattle. They're doing the same thing that they did 4 years ago, virtually the same thing.
Interesting.
And
I
so
don't.
it's not going as well in places like Portland
Yeah.
and San Francisco and Seattle as it is in places like Texas. Oh, gee, wonder why.
Yeah. Do you remember? I think it was it Portland or was it Seattle that had the autonomous zone last time, or
It
was
was
it Portland?
Seattle, right on the
Yeah. So I don't know if you remember this, but Nathan French went in there evangelizing, and he repurposed a dumpster to baptize people. They were they were
That's cool. I didn't hear about that.
yeah, they were having baptisms. They cleaned out this dumpster and filled it up with water. I mean, Nathan is he's so wide open, he was just like, we got to figure out a way to baptize these people. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's got a team out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Really interesting. So, okay, now precedent, going back to
Precedent. All right.
yeah, let's get
talk
back.
about precedent, shall we?
I can capitalize on ADD when I need to. Boom, back to precedent.
All right.
Okay, go.
Precedent. What is precedent? Most people, when they use the term precedent, they're talking about legal precedent. So legal precedent is the idea that once something is established, typically in case law, it becomes a precedent for future actions. And the American legal system, and actually most legal systems around the world, rely heavily on precedent to make rulings on current situations. So if you take a case that goes into court and you're going to argue your point on this case, the best way for you to argue the validity of your perspective, your case, is to base it on prior cases that have been decided similarly to the way you want your case to be decided. You cite legal precedent, right? So what we're talking about here in this context is the idea that if the Biden administration sets a legal precedent where they are justifying certain behaviors, certain types of prosecution as a legitimate way to run the Department of Justice, as a legitimate way to prosecute enemies of the state, then those same principles can then be used by the next president because they've already set the precedent during this administration. So there's this question. Anons have been asking this question for a long time. Is Trump somehow allowing the Biden administration to set legal precedent that he will then use when he becomes president to do the same things to the people who are prosecuting him and the J6ers and all the other conservatives during this current administration? And I'll just say this. Some Anons and researchers have taken the view that Trump intentionally lost the 2020 election so that he could allow Biden to take over, and that they somehow knew that Biden would do all kinds of crazy legal proceedings and set legal precedent, which then Trump could then come back 4 years later and use that same legal precedent to prosecute these people. That's sort of their view. I personally don't think Trump intentionally lost the 2020 election. I think Trump did everything possible to win the 2020 election. And when Biden was inaugurated, Trump and his people decided, okay, they're going to come after us. We have to weather the storm. We have to do our best to represent ourselves in court using case law and black letter law. And then when we get our chance, we need to turn the tables on them, and we'll get our revenge in 4 years. And so Ivan Raiklin has come out and has proposed that he is going to be the secretary of retribution. Flynn has said he wants to be the secretary of accountability. And I would just want to say one thing about Flynn. Flynn has said on Twitter that he knows what is needed to reform the FBI. Flynn has been bucking to become the next director of the FBI for at least a year and a half. Yeah. Now, recently, when there's this debate and Trump has waded into this debate about the new FBI headquarters. They want to build the FBI headquarters out in the middle of nowhere, the new FBI headquarters. And Trump's like, no. The FBI headquarters has to be in D.C. It has to be within walking distance of the DOJ. We can't have these people commuting all over the place. And there's a lot of people getting their noses kind of bent out of shape about Trump acknowledging that the FBI needs a new headquarters.
Yeah.
That you have to understand how Trump works. All right. If Trump were to come out prior to being elected, and if Trump were to say, I'm going to disband the FBI, that would harm him in the eyes of the public. People would wonder, well, why would he disband the FBI? That's like the federal law enforcement. Like, he couldn't do that. Like, that's crazy. People would not understand. Normies would not understand a presidential candidate threatening to disband the FBI.
I was just going to say, there's so many normies out there.
So Trump is not going to come out and overtly tell us his plans regarding the FBI, CIA, DOJ prior to the election. He's not going to do that because that is going to harm him in the eyes of the public. However, some of his surrogates will come out and say those things. Kash Patel will talk some shit about the FBI and the DOJ and the CIA. Yeah. General Flynn the other day weighed in on that issue and said, FBI doesn't need a new building. FBI needs to be disbanded.
Yeah.
Okay. Flynn is coming out and publicly saying the FBI needs to be disbanded. And he has also lobbied hard to be the next director of the FBI. Now,
how does that
put that in your pipe and smoke it for about an hour and tell me what kind of conclusions you come up with. Because I think that if Trump gets elected, I think Flynn has the inside track on being the FBI director. And I think Flynn oversees the dismantling of the FBI.
That would be so good.
Now let's talk about Ivan Raiklin. So Raiklin is out there and he does this interview with this, I guess, 19-year-old reporter from Politico who's like, her eyes are this big and she's listening to Ivan Raiklin talk about how they're going to assemble teams of former military and some people who are J6 who've been J6 defendants, and that they're going to have these people deputized and they're going to go do 6 a.m. door knocks on the deep state hit list, which is several hundred people who have weaponized the justice system against patriotic Americans.
Yeah.
And Raiklin is basically putting them on blast, on warning, saying, we're coming for you when we get back in office. We're going to flip the tables. We're going to flip the script, and we're coming for you. And we will use local law enforcement authority to do it. We're not going to use the DOJ because the DOJ is a corrupt and completely useless system right now. So that's what we're hearing from Raiklin and Flynn and other people.
It's very interesting. I mean, especially given, the connection between Raiklin and General Flynn. And I think this is a good time to, so just a reminder for those who are coming in late, Dave just talked about Ivan Raiklin and the conversation that Ivan had with this reporter. And it was really pivotal. It's gone viral. General Flynn was promoting it. A lot of big accounts have retruthed it.
It's got 8 million views on Twitter.
How many? 8 million?
8 million as of yesterday.
it's really, and that's not counting the views from people who have cut clips and made memes and things like that. So it's really gone viral, and it's been very interesting to see. So I reached out to Ivan. He is going to come on the show tomorrow, and so we will have him
You're in
going.
for a long podcast.
I know, I know. Ivan is very long-winded, and
He is.
he likes to filibuster, I will say that. So I'll do my best to get a word in
Good luck.
And to keep him on track. He's very, I mean, he really knows his stuff. So if you're interested in this and you want to get a real read on, you know, the key players and a lot of the peripheral players and the connections between a lot of these people in the swamp and a lot of the sort of incestuous type of relationships in the swamp, I think it also will help for those people who still wonder, well, why didn't Trump drain the swamp, right? Trump didn't drain the swamp. Well, there's like a hell of a lot going on up there. And, you know, he did the best he could with 8,000 knives being thrust in his back every day, even by people who were supposed to be on his own team. It's kind of interesting because Aaron Rodgers was on an interview with Tucker, and he was being kind of critical of Trump for not draining the swamp. And I was like, you know, I really want to talk to Aaron Rodgers because I do like him. And I just want to say, you know, Aaron, what would it be like if you were trying to get the ball down the field and your own offensive line was tackling you? I mean, that's
Yeah,
what that's what Trump was dealing with. He had,
literally
yeah,
every
people,
every department head.
yeah, people
You know,
undermining
even
him.
and we found out later on, even people like Pompeo were not really willing to advance Trump's
Yeah,
agenda.
yeah,
All of us thought for 4 years, Pompeo's a patriot. He's doing the best he can. We find out after the fact that he's kind of a member of the swamp. And people who
yeah,
worked with him at State Department said, you know, he would kiss Trump's ass every day in the Oval Office, then go over to the CIA or go over to the
yeah,
State Department and undermine everything Trump wanted to do while he was on the job. So from Gina
yeah,
Haspel at the CIA to Pompeo to Barr to Jeff Sessions, everyone he appointed in a position of authority who could have helped drain the swamp undermined and sabotaged his
yeah,
agenda.
yeah,
And the reason he didn't drain the swamp was he had a bunch of traitors working with him. I don't think that's going to be the case in this next administration. We've got a young man named Johnny McEntee, who his claim to fame was some trick football video that he did when he was in college. Really good quarterback, could throw a football through basketball hoops from 200 feet away.
hmm,
But Johnny McEntee was appointed the guy to take over the presidential office of personnel. And that is a very important office. And Trump's people didn't realize how important that office was. That office oversees 6,000 appointed
hmm,
people in government. And it was filled with swamp creatures. And the woman who was running it was a swamp creature under Trump. And they finally figured out that one of the reasons why the swamp wasn't being drained was because they had a swamp critter running that office. So they got rid of her and they brought in Johnny McEntee. And he began replacing a lot of the swampy people. Well, what's happening right now is the Heritage Foundation is working with Johnny McEntee and some other people on what's called Project 47, Project 2025. Project 2025 is an administrative hiring process. They're going through lists of names of people and they're vetting candidates for these positions that have to be filled after the transition. Like I said, this office oversees like between 5,000 and 6,000 people. A lot of those positions can be cut, but they have to have patriotic, hardworking people in those positions, or Trump has no chance to drain a swamp.
yeah,
They're already working on vetting people to go into these positions on day one, have them come in and go to work and start draining the swamp. I think Trump has a better chance of draining the swamp this time than he did in his last term in office.
I think so too. I think so too. I want to bring the conversation back to some of the potential people in the next Trump administration, especially General Flynn. I think this is a good time to take a little break for those of you who need a beverage refresh or other type of refreshing. We're not going away. We will be back. We're going to have about a little 4-minute commercial here, and you're going to find out about some of my affiliate partners that help us keep the show going. And just remember, whenever you buy from any of these links that I put up on the screen, you are actually helping Mary Grace Media just keep the lights on, keep the internet on, all of those things. And there's a bunch more that aren't mentioned, and you can find those at my website, marygracemedia.com. So stick around, don't go away. We aren't going away, and so you shouldn't either. Watch this and buy something. Listen, your health is your best investment. We have a country to save, and we need people who are in the best shape of their lives, physically, mentally, spiritually. Why not connect with a team who cares about you on every single level from the inside out? Official Synapse is that team. OfficialSynapse.com. It's official, SYNAPSE.com. Tell them Mary Grace sent you, and they will treat you like family. If you're like most people, you really probably haven't thought about transferring your paper dollars into physical gold and silver. But I want to tell you a story. My friend Andrew Sorcini over at Beverly Hills Precious Metals, he recently went overseas and he wanted to buy a watch. He likes fine watches. He took 3 currencies with him. He took gold, he took Bitcoin, and he took American dollars. Now, there used to be a time when the American dollar was king. I remember that when I used to travel overseas. Everybody wanted dollars. The people that he was dealing with would not take his dollars because the dollar is so devalued around the world. They wanted the gold. So this is what I recommend to you. I want you to think about this. If you have cash in the bank, if you have an investment account that you have worked hard for years to accumulate, consider the value of converting that money into physical gold and silver. You're not buying something that's losing value. You're changing those worthless dollars into a tangible physical asset that will go up in value, which it has done historically. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to go to bh-pm.com. The first thing you're going to do is schedule that free consultation. Second thing, just think rationally about this, pray about it, go to the Lord, see what the best decision for you and your family is. I can't tell you that. I don't want to pressure you into that. What I do know is don't be scared, be prepared. And so the third thing you want to do is make a decision for you and your family. Make a decision, take action. bh-pm.com. Let them know Mary Grace sent you. When it comes to food, we really want to be aware of what is in the food that we're consuming. And that includes different types of technologies, jibber jabbers, technology that can alter your genetic makeup. And this is why we want to focus on American grown beef that isn't injected with things that you wouldn't put into your own body. We really don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. We saw 4 years ago what happened when the whole country shut down and people couldn't even go to the grocery store. We saw what happened when meat and other foods were rationed, and that could happen any day. We want you to be prepared. We want you to take action. And one of the best ways to do that is to secure food for yourself and your family. What better way than to go to griddownchowdown.com, use promo code Mary Grace, get a sustainable, reliable, shelf-stable source of high-quality American beef. All you do is go to griddownchowdown.com, tell them Mary Grace sent you, put your order in the basket and check out, and you're good to go. The other thing you can do is you can get a subscription. If you do a subscription, you're going to get this freeze-dried beef delivered to your door every month. And you're going to save a little bit while you do that. You're going to stockpile it, or you can just cook with it. Some people are just using it for their regular cooking. It's really up to you, but it's super convenient because it's freeze-dried and it's shelf-stable for 12, 15 years or more. Go to griddownchowdown.com and use promo code Mary Grace. I just want to give a shout out to everybody who watches this show. Thank you for being a participant. Thank you for being a loyal audience member. I just want to remind you, if you like what you've seen, please share this and don't forget to subscribe, turn on your notifications, and also sign up for my email list so you never miss a show. We're back. Hey, I have one more thing I need to share with everybody. I'm Mary Grace, and this is Conspiracy of Truth with me and my friend Dave. And so it's pretty exciting. We're having a great conversation, and we're going to be talking here in just a second about General Flynn, and especially as regards to information warfare. And so there is one more thing that I want to show you. Oh, here it is. I have another QR code tomorrow night. What's today? Saturday. Yeah, tomorrow. Tomorrow at 8 p.m. I'm going to be a special guest on a Twitter space hosted by Kimmy. It's Kim MAGA Gal 2 on X, and this is pinned to her profile. This QR code here goes directly to her profile on X. It is at 8 p.m. And if you're not familiar with spaces, it's an audio conversation that people have on X. It's only on X. And so I know that some of you aren't on there, some of you got banned, blah, 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 blah. But if you can get on X and you can listen, it's going to be a very interesting conversation, because I'm going to be going into not just the concept of the information war, but also I'm going to be talking about some recent incidents, and also some things that you want to be aware of, and just how to avoid being a pawn in the information war, because a lot of people have been sucked into some pretty crazy narratives, and that is just where the opposition wants you. And so we'll be talking about that. It's going to be at 8 p.m. Eastern on X, and the account will be Kim MAGA Gal 2 on X, and it will also be, I'll repost it, and I'll try to send out an email as well. So again, this is not going to be streamed on the other platforms. It's only on X, and it's audio only, so you don't even have to get hair and makeup to listen. You just listen. All right, that's it. And Dave,
get ready for a long podcast.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting.
My space that I did with Phenom the other night,
yeah,
7.5 hours.
No, I told her I have to go to bed early.
We started at 3 and we got done at 10:30 my time. And
Okay,
it was still going after I left. I was like, hey, I got stuff to do in the morning. Can I duck out? And she's like, oh yeah, you can duck out. We'll just keep going.
Okay,
so
that's
I was
crazy.
on for 7.5 hours.
Listen, I told her
it was great. We raised a lot of money for Phenom, and we had
Okay.
great conversations about preparedness. It was very cool. But 7.5 hours is a long a long live stream.
Yeah, that is a long time. I don't think I'm going 7.5 hours. I have to get my beauty sleep. So,
Yeah.
but that's crazy. Anyway, 8 p.m. Eastern is when we start, and I'm going to be the featured guest, and so it's going to be fun. Yeah, we're gonna talk. I'm not going to be the only one talking. It is a conversation, and so I'm very excited and very honored to be invited to that. And I hope that all of you who are listening now will spread the word and come and take part. And again, you can pop in and listen for a short time, long time. You can. Usually they put up replays, but it takes a while for those to become available. And it's audio only. So if you're driving on a trip or working around the house, making dinner, whatever, it's a really good thing, because you don't have to follow the video. Okay, so that's it. And that brings me to talking about General Flynn, because I think that a couple of things have come up this week in particular with people who are trying to discredit him, not just him, but the movement in general. But his name comes in, and the specific post that I'm talking about is Jan Halper Hayes came out, and can you describe it? I just
did not see that one coming. Yeah. So Jan,
but you had your doubts about her, didn't you?
Oh yeah, we all had our doubts about her.
Okay. All right.
Jan Halper Hayes kind of became a thing. She gained some notoriety after Trump and Flynn both posted. Let's see. I think it was on True Social, this video that an Anon made where Jan Halper Hayes was talking about how she has a job inside of as a consultant with some group in the connected to the military, and she was telling this story about how they have all this data on the election and they know about the fraud and they're going to bring it out at the right time and they're going to spring this trap and it's going to be great and the deep state's going to be caught. She tells this story for about 10 minutes. So an Anon posted that on True Social, Flynn reposted it on True Social, and then Trump reposted it on True Social. And Flynn's like, oh, Jan Halper Hayes is great. And Trump retweeted it. And everyone's like, oh my gosh, what's going on with Jan Halper Hayes? Oh, it's there's a plan. Oh, there's a big trap. And no, it's going to be sprung. And then we're all, Jordan Sather, me, and some of their Anons were like, oh gosh, like really, this is another person coming out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Nobody knew anything about. And suddenly she's on all the podcasts, on all the live streams, talking with, and especially promoting people like Charlie Ward, Simon Parks, and all these other fake intelligence insiders. So I'm like, okay.
Derek Johnson.
She's hanging with the wrong crowd. She's promoting all these fake LARPing intelligence insiders, which tells me she's probably a fake LARPing intelligence insider. So I was like, okay, just mental note, wait for her to turn against Flynn like they all do eventually. And sure enough, this week, she gets on Twitter /X/ whatever you want to call it this week. And she goes on this long rant where she accuses Flynn of basically selling out to the deep state, that he can't be trusted. And it's nothing overt and it's no direct accusation. It's a whole lot of innuendo.
Yeah.
Throwing shade on Flynn and disparaging him and telling people, be careful who you follow. He might not really be a patriot. We all know that there's people like this in the movement. So Flynn responds to her and, well, he just like, don't you freaking people have anything better to do with your time than just pick on me and harass me?
Yeah.
So then a lot of the Anons jumped on that thread and we're like, oh gosh, imagine our surprise that Jan Halper Hayes turns out to be another one of these people who's going to turn against Flynn and try to convince everyone that Flynn is deep state.
Yeah.
It's obvious to most of us. This is all coordinated. It's all coming at the right time. The Flynn movie is out. We're all seeing it. Flynn is still has been from day one and still is the most threatening person to the deep state. That's what the Flynn movie is about. Like, why did they take him? Why did they have to get rid of him as national security advisor to Trump? Because Flynn knows where the bodies are buried. He knows who put the bodies there. And they knew they could not let him stay in government or they would all be at risk of being exposed. So there has been a constant attack on Flynn for 8 years, and it has not stopped. It's ramping up now because we're getting close to the election. So you need to be a little bit cautious because everyone from Lynn Wood, all these other people, they're all going to be out there throwing shade on Flynn, trying to convince you that Flynn can't be trusted. And that kind of just came to a head this week.
Yeah, Mike Gill, I think, is really one of the ringleaders in this, and people have asked me about him, sent me his stuff. One of the things that I encourage, first of all, I don't have time to go and listen to all of these videos.
I don't either. I don't listen to any of these people. I just, I know of them. I know they're out there. I've observed some of the stuff they said, and I could, like, years ago figured out, okay, that guy's fake, this guy's fake. The thing with Derek Johnson, all Derek Johnson did was he took all of Patel Patriot's research and then repackaged it and tried to sell it as his own research. Yeah. And then last summer, for those of you who are big Derek Johnson fans, last spring, Derek Johnson told everyone that there were going to be executions at Gitmo in June and July, and he was going to go down there and he was going to report on the executions that were going to be happening for Hillary and Soros and Comey and all the other members of the deep state. And guess what happened? Nothing happened. Nothing came from that, Mr. Derek Johnson. One of his many lies that he has been telling people, giving them hopium. And so if you enjoy following these people, you can enjoy following them. Just realize you're being sold a lot of BS. And you would do well to sharpen your discernment when it comes to these people.
I was just going to say, it really comes down to discernment. And
Yeah.
one of the things, and I want to say this too, people send me information, they ask me questions, they ask my opinion about things. And a lot of times, first of all, if you send me a link and you don't give me any context, I'm never going to click on it.
Delete.
And I need you to just give me the brief synopsis. This is what it's about. And typically, I try to reply to people, and when I do reply, it may sound dismissive to you, but I want you to understand that I have spent years analyzing these types of accounts and developing discernment and something called pattern recognition. And so I don't even know that I can always articulate to you what it is that I'm seeing in this particular person. Or, I mean, if I really wanted to, I could go down and delineate, okay, this is what I see on their Twitter account. This is what I see them saying. These are the inconsistencies that I'm tracking. But in general, I don't have the time to go through the list of what raises red flags for me to tell you individually why I'm not following that person, or why I'm not going to have them on my show, or why I have concerns about them. But suffice it to say, if you come at me 10 times and ask me to have a certain person on my show and I don't respond, it doesn't mean that I haven't looked into it. It just means that my spidey senses are telling me, oh, hell no, that's not going to happen. And so just understand there's a process that we go through, that Dave goes through, that I go through, that Anons go through. It's kind of a finely tuned process of discernment that we've developed over quite a bit of time, of seeing the same patterns emerge with different people. They may look different, they may sound different, but they all have very similar characteristics that they bring to the table. And that is how we come to these decisions. Dave is not just out there willy-nilly criticizing people because he doesn't agree with everything they say. He's criticizing them because of the glaring inconsistency, because of the outright lies, because of the obvious grifting and profiteering that they're doing, and preying on really unsuspecting and innocent people who are looking for truth. And in many cases, they're exploiting the innocence of people who are really coming away from the fake news and starting to wake up to the fact that they've been lied to for a very long time. And these people have developed the art, because in many cases they're operatives who are put in place by the intelligence agencies that also run the news media. They are put in place to give you a soft landing place and something else to believe in. So just understand that. It's really important to understand that they seem very sincere. They do. And they seem to have a lot of information and inside information. And I get that it's easy sometimes to get sucked down those rabbit trails, especially if you're just searching for hopium. But you don't have to trust me. But I think if you look at the track record of these people, you're going to see that what Dave and I are talking about is accurate. Do you want to add anything to that?
Nope. Mic drop.
Thank you. Okay, so that's it. And I know people don't agree with me, and that's okay. You don't have to. But I'm going with General Flynn, and I'm here to tell you that General Flynn is the real person. That it's not a character. They didn't replace him with an actor. I think
he's not wearing a mask.
I think his family would know. I mean, I've had conversations with his sister, Mary. I think she would know if it wasn't her baby brother.
Probably.
I mean, right? I think you know. You can't really pull that off on people. And I've been at so many events with him, and he's such a genuine guy. He really is. And pretty, I mean, he's a general, and you guys have seen him on the show, but there's a lot of humility there as well. And so I just want and talk about service. I mean, he's retired, and he is just serving our country still, and he's ready to serve again. Grifters don't do that. So just think about that, guys. Okay. All right. I'm just looking at the comments here. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So Rumble people. Oh, okay. I have a troll on Rumble that is trying to sell noise canceling headphones. Okay, that's crazy. What will they come up with next? All right, just sorry. This is always something. Do we need those for the apocalypse? Should I delete it?
Your call.
I'm deleting. Okay. All right. So Dave, I think that we're coming up on 90 minutes here. I wanted to ask you if you I see a comment. Hold on a second. I see a comment. I'm not even going to dignify that with a response. Okay. So you want to talk about preparedness, or do you want to talk about prayer and healing?
Preparedness.
What's on your heart? Okay, preparedness.
Yeah, preparedness. Real quick.
Okay. You got a book. Let me put the book up.
Holy cats. That one. Emergency preparedness and off-grid communication, and you can get it on Amazon, get it at Barnes & Noble. I talked at length on that space. I think it was Wednesday night. There you go, with the QR code.
Yeah.
On the Wednesday night space that we did on Twitter with our friend Phenom, I talked at length about the concepts involved in emergency preparedness and off-grid communication. Holy moly. If you haven't a chance to go back and listen to that space on the replay, we talked about everything from how to prepare to survive nuclear war, because there is a chapter in this book on how to survive nuclear war, and why I believe that nuclear war is not the end of the world, that most of the world's population would survive nuclear war. And some of us need to start thinking about what our world is going to be like if that happens, and if most of us survive it. So getting back down to some more basic level instruction on emergency preparedness and the things that God's been talking to me about. I'm still getting a lot of revelation from the Lord on off-grid communication. Off-grid communication and backup power, I think, are going to be two big things. And I'm not sure what is going to be the inciting incident, what is going to be the mechanism that causes us to have problems in the future. So most of us know that Chris Wray has been out there talking to Congress, and he's actually been talking about this in other public venues, about his concern that China has infiltrated our critical infrastructure through I'm trying to remember the name of the hack that they're using. Volt Typhoon. You can just do a search on your favorite search engine, Volt Typhoon, and look for recent news articles about Volt Typhoon. And you'll find out Volt Typhoon is a hacking project that China has had in place for a while. And they're using this, a suite of techniques to infiltrate U.S. critical infrastructure, power grids, water distribution systems, water purification plants, transportation infrastructure, everything. The Chinese have infiltrated, and they have been able to hack into these systems. And Chris Wray has been saying now for 6 months that they're going to try to take down our critical infrastructure. It's not a question of if they're going to do it. It is a question of when they're going to do it. He does not believe there's any way that we can prevent it. The NSA has to some degree been able to slow down the progression of the Volt Typhoon hacks, but they're not able to contain it. And they're continuing to expand and spread into other areas of infrastructure. So I think it would be prudent, since we have our FBI director warning us that there is a very potentially very serious threat coming. Now, I know that there are people out there on social media who are going to say, well, do you believe Chris Wray? Chris Wray is deep state. He's a liar. Why do you believe him? I don't believe Chris Wray. All right. But you have to think about why someone like the FBI director is saying this. I'm not saying it's true. I'm not saying that I believe China is going to hack our infrastructure. I think it's possible. I think that China has the technology to do it. North Korea has the technology to do it. So does Iran. So does Russia. So do a lot of countries. They have the ability to get in to our critical infrastructure and create problems. There's no question that they have the capacity to do it. So I would say, number one, that there's a reason why Chris Wray and the director of CISA, I forget her name, had been sounding the warning alarm about this for the last year and a half or so. Number one, I think it is possible that China is actually trying to take down our critical infrastructure. We've been at war with China. It's a Cold War. We've been at war with China for a long time. Trump said during his administration he was a wartime president. Who's he at war with? Was there a shooting war going on, a kinetic war between another country? No. We were in an economic war with China. And that was one of Trump's big agendas during his administration, was to try to get us into a better position with respect to China in trade and economics, because we were in an economic war. China has been doing a lot of things over the years to try to harm us financially, from a technical standpoint, from an information technology standpoint. A lot of the Huawei equipment that came into our information infrastructure has been taken out and removed, because they understood that China was using that to create vulnerabilities in our critical infrastructure.
Yeah, I remember that.
That's continuing. So I'm not saying I believe absolutely that China is going to hack our critical infrastructure. The head of CISA has said it could come from Russia or Iran or North Korea or any other number of countries. It is also possible that it would actually be the CIA that takes down our critical infrastructure.
Imagine that.
It could be that our own deep state is planning to hack our critical infrastructure and blame China so we can start another war. That's totally possible. I'm not saying I believe Chris Wray and take everything he says at face value, but that's not the point. The point of this conversation is, I think there is going to be an event in the future, whether it is man-made or natural, that is going to cause problems with our power grid, our water distribution, our ability to communicate, cell phone service, internet. Now, there's another possibility. It's possible that one of those solar flares that's popping off right now in area 2662, when that thing comes back around toward Earth in about 10 days, that thing could shoot off a massive solar flare and a coronal mass ejection that could do to our power grid what happened in 1859, which is called the Carrington event. In 1859, a massive solar flare shot off from the surface of the sun. It brought with it a coronal mass ejection. CME is just a large area of plasma that's directed out into space. If it happens to go toward Earth, it causes radio blackouts. And if it's really big, it can cause power grid disruptions.
And you're saying you think that are they capable of manipulating that?
No.
Okay. It's
No,
just
but there's a
coincidental.
lot of people. A lot of people have been talking about the HARP technology
Yeah.
and the possibility that all these auroras and the radio blackouts are being caused by man-made technology like HARP, where
Mhm.
they're blaming the sun for things we're actually doing to our own ionosphere. I don't know if there's no way to prove that.
Mhm. Mhm.
There's no evidence. There's no way you can prove that. We do know that we have the technology that can mess up the ionosphere in a big
Mhm.
way and can cause
Mhm.
things like the auroras to go into lower latitudes. That is a known.
Interesting. Okay. And
Technology does exist. We know that for a fact.
and that's why is that why we were seeing the northern lights
No,
in
it's not what we were seeing in Northern
well,
Lights. So
does it have anything to do with it? It seems like it would.
hang on, hang on.
Okay.
Okay, how do I draw an analogy? Just
Yeah.
because someone has the ability to do something doesn't
Yeah.
mean that every time that thing happens, that that person is the one who did it.
Correlation and causation
Correlation is not causation,
necessarily.
right? Just
Okay.
because, just because we have the ability to cause auroras to appear at the lower latitudes by messing with the ionosphere, that doesn't mean that every time auroras come down to the lower latitudes, it's always humans messing with the ionosphere. Because in order for that to be true, all of the solar weather people on social media, on YouTube, on Twitter, we have to get all of them to lie about the data that they're seeing coming from the sun. They're all saying there's massive sunspots, massive solar flares, massive coronal mass
Mhm.
ejections. We see the video, you can see the coronagraphs, you can see them going off. They have to get all of those people to lie
Right.
about what they're seeing on the sun so that the people on Earth can manipulate the auroras and make it look like the sun's doing it.
Got
That is
it.
a
Okay.
massive conspiracy. You have to get all those researchers to get on the same page and lie and say they're seeing things on the sun that are not actually happening. That's
I
that's the problem
okay.
because I follow lots and lots of people on social media, YouTube and Twitter, who are
Mhm.
all reporting very similar things
Okay.
using their measurements, their testing equipment from coming from the
Mhm.
sun, and they're seeing massive changes on the surface of the sun.
Okay.
So if you want to say that it's man-made, then you have to explain why are all these researchers saying it's coming from the sun,
Okay, that makes sense, yeah. I
right?
feel like I'm in an episode of Star Trek right now, just
Yeah. So
okay.
here's the reason I'm bringing this up. All right.
Bring it home, Dave.
When that last series of solar flares popped off about a week ago,
Mhm.
it was last weekend, and we had 7 coronal mass ejections in a row that were directed earthward, and we had radio blackouts pretty much the whole weekend. there was a period on Sunday morning where I was able to get on my net Sunday afternoon and get on my net and talk to some of the local people. But outside of about a 3 or 4 hour window, the entire weekend, there was a radio blackout. The noise floor was so high on the HF radio bands, it was pretty much impossible to talk to anyone for the whole
Interesting.
weekend.
Huh.
And and that's caused by massive coronal mass ejections coming toward Earth or solar flares in some cases. The reason I'm bringing this up is we are in an 11-year solar cycle. It's solar cycle 25. And the sun has these solar cycles every 11 years where the number of sunspots increases for a period of time and then it decreases. And from the high point to the next high point is 11 years, or if you want to, that's the solar maximum. The solar minimum is the least number of sunspots. And from the solar minimum to solar minimum is 11 years. So we're in an 11-year cycle of the sun, and we're moving toward a solar maximum in the summer of 2025. Not this summer, but a year from now. That is when scientists are forecasting that we're going to have the maximum amount of sunspot and solar flare activity on the sun. We're a year away from that, and we're already seeing a lot of solar flares, coronal mass ejections, and an enormous number of sunspots, much more so than the last solar cycle 11 years ago, or even, I would argue, 22 years ago, the previous cycle to that. There were some very big solar flares in that one 22 years ago, but we're not at the solar maximum yet. So the reason I'm bringing all this up is I think it's possible that these large areas on the sun that are emitting these solar flares and CMEs, in the next year, I think it's possible that one of those could be Earth directed, and it could be large enough that it could take down our power grid. And that's what happened in 1859 during the Carrington event. Massive solar flare was emitted with a coronal mass ejection. It was large enough to destroy all the power lines and all of the telegraph lines on the side of the Earth that was facing the sun. And it took quite a while to rebuild the infrastructure after that. We have a lot more infrastructure right now that could be damaged by that kind of an event. And here is the difference. I just need to be clear about this. There's actually three potential threats we face that could affect our critical infrastructure, i.e. cell phones, internet, and power grids. One is cyber attack. That is a human initiated attack through software and hardware, where someone could take down critical infrastructure. The second one is an EMP, electromagnetic pulse. If North Korea decides that they want to attack us and they detonate a nuclear warhead at 250 miles above the United States, that electromagnetic pulse could take out much of the power grids and radios, computers, laptops, phones, the circuits in your car, and any other electronic circuits. Electromagnetic pulses can damage large, long wires in the power grid and very small wires and circuits in radios, TVs, phones, and other things. EMP is a very broadband pulse of electromagnetic radiation that destroys a lot of stuff that's electronic. The difference between an EMP and a coronal mass ejection is a CME does not destroy radios, phones, tablets, and small circuits. It really, the energy from a coronal mass ejection really only couples onto the long conductors like power lines and telephone lines. So if we were to experience a coronal mass ejection that's very large, it would likely damage telephones, telephone wires, any long wires, and power grid, long wires that are connecting the power grid. Transformers would probably blow, but it would not likely damage phones, tablets, computers, cars, stuff of that nature. So those are the three threats. And like I said, God has been giving me these warnings for 3 years about coming disruptions to the power grid, to communications. He's been continually just instructing me, build out your communications platform. Mesh networking, so I'm using Meshtastic. Arden mesh networking, which is for amateur radio, general mobile radio service, GMRS, so I can talk to people who don't have a license, and a lot of other communications projects, and also backup power. So we live in Phoenix. We have a lot of sun, so I've got some small and good medium-sized solar generators. We have a tri-fuel gas generator, and as I told you before we went on the air this morning, I was putting a soft start unit on my air conditioner, because if you plan to run your air conditioning unit off of a generator or a solar battery, you're not going to be able to do it unless you put a soft start unit on your air conditioner that drops the current load at startup down to a level that can be powered by your generator or the batteries. Most air conditioning units if they consume while they're running, let's say 3,000 watts, it's going to take 9,000, maybe 7 to 8, 9,000, maybe 10,000 watts to start them. A soft start reduces the current needed to get it started so that it can actually start using a generator or a solar battery. So yeah, this morning I was installing a soft start on our air conditioner, and it was quite hot outside, and I got really sweaty and a little dehydrated. But all of that is to say, I think you would be wise to put aside some water, store some water in a pantry, in a closet, put aside some canned food, start thinking about how would you communicate with friends and relatives if the communication systems went down, internet goes down, cell phone goes down. How are you going to communicate with people that you love? I think these are just, if you've been listening to my podcast, you keep hearing me banging the drum, and I'm going to keep on banging it because that is what the Lord is speaking to me about. That we've got some problems coming.
And it's in your book that you
And
give
it's all
details.
in the book, Emergency Preparedness and Off-Grid Communication. First half of the book is basic emergency preparedness, food, water, how to communicate. First part of the book, how to navigate without GPS, because those pesky solar flares can take out GPS satellites. And there were some military satellites that went offline last weekend.
Interesting.
How to navigate. Wow. How to navigate without GPS. Then there's instruction in that book about handguns, self-defense, home defense, surviving nuclear war. That's the first half of the book. And first aid. There's an extensive section on first aid in that book because, well, medicine is kind of an interesting subject to me. Second half of the book is all about off-grid communication, how to communicate without using internet or cell phone. And that book is available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble.
It's, one of the questions that I have is, and I think a lot of people have this question. There's more than one, but a couple things. I think that it can be overwhelming just from a magnitude standpoint, because, if these things happen, it's not just an inconvenience, it's a mass casualty event. I mean, let's face it. There are everything in our world, in the Western world, operates on electronics. And it's almost impossible to imagine a scenario where you don't have mass casualties. And, even to the scale of what they were talking about with the pandemic, they got us frightened about that when it didn't actually, the facts didn't line up with the prediction. But that's an issue. And I'm just trying to figure out how do you get your head around that? And then also the fact that it's really not practical on any level for one person or one family to do everything in your book. I think. And so how do you circumvent that? And I guess I'm leading to the question about community. How do you develop a community where you have people working in different lanes of expertise to focus on things that they can really help with and achieve?
It is possible for one individual to become self-sufficient and be completely off-grid, completely off of the supply chains that most of us rely on at grocery stores and Amazon and Walmart and everything else. There are people who just completely, if you know the Amish, for example, they have figured out how to do it. So it is possible to live without any of the modern conveniences. Most people don't do it because, it's terribly inconvenient. But to your point, if you are like most of us, we're terribly reliant on the supply chains, reliant on the communication network, reliant on the power grid. How do you transition yourself so that you're less reliant on all of that technology and more self-reliant? You can gradually start doing that. That's what I did. It's a gradual process. You're not going to go out and buy $100,000 worth of prepper gear in one day and suddenly have all your problems solved. That's not how it works. You get there a little bit at a time. You buy a little bit of water. You may buy, a water filtration device or two. Get a life straw so you can filter water, or a zero water filter device. There's lots of different options for filtering water. Go at it from a priority perspective. Water is the number one most important thing that you need. If you were to lose your supply of clean drinking water, you would survive 3 days and you would die. So water is number one. Just go to the grocery store, buy a couple gallons of water this week. Next time you go to the store, buy a couple more gallons of water and set it aside. Next time you go, buy a couple more gallons of water, set it aside. Each time you go, buy a couple of cans of canned food. Whatever you like, tuna, chicken, beef, Spam, whatever you like, get a couple of cans of canned food. Canned food has an indefinite shelf life. Even though canned food has an expiration date on it, in fact, as long as the integrity of the can is not compromised, canned food can be eaten 35 years later if you want. It's not going to go bad.
Yeah.
So get some water, get some food. Think about maybe having a way to boil water. Maybe have a little propane cook stove or a Coleman fuel cook stove, or some way to boil water. If you have a propane tank, have 5 or 10, 15 gallons of propane, those little tanks sitting in your garage. Store up some propane. Have a way to have to use that propane in a grill. And you just slowly sort of preparing for the critical things that you're going to need. If you lose the ability to cook in your house, you lose your water, you have something to get you by for 4 or 5 days, a week, 2 weeks, until things get better, power gets restored, and whatever. Back to community though. If we end up in a situation where there's a prolonged outage, internet, cell phone, power outage, we're going to see rioting and civil unrest like we've never seen before.
Yeah.
And that is not hyperbole. If the internet goes down and cell phone service goes down, no one's going to be able to go to the grocery store or the gas station and swipe their card and put gas in their car or get food. That immediately ceases. And I went to the nearest grocery store right down the street from my place about 2 weeks ago. I went in there, and the check stand people were standing in the doorways. They're not letting anybody in. I was like, what's going on? They said, oh, you can't come in. I'm like, why? Our computers are down. all of our screens are black and the computers are down. We don't know what's going on. It's happened before, but
we can't take your money.
We don't have any way to cash anybody out. I'm like, okay, I guess I'll go home and come back later or something. So I left. If the computer systems go down, internet goes down, they can't swipe the cards, immediately you're not going into a grocery store to buy food. You may try to go into a grocery store and steal food. You might get shot doing that. But if the internet goes down, people can't make electronic payments and withdrawals from their banks. Banks are down. People are going to start rioting and panicking and going crazy. That is the time you want to be inside your house, not out there in the community. You want to be in your house, because that's where people are going to get killed and hurt. And so if this situation draws out over the course of 2 weeks or 2 months or a year, you have to have a community of people. You're not going to be self-sufficient. You have to have a community of people that you can go to, where you can collaborate with them, where you can share the services and goods that you have and get some of the things you need that you don't have. If you don't have the ability to provide emergency medical care, you would want to have somebody in your group of friends like me, who's a paramedic, who has a big bag full of medical equipment that I can do. I can do dressings, I can do sutures, I can do. I've got all kinds of things that I can provide to people who need medical care.
Yeah.
Right. I would be a resource to a group of people who don't have the medical supplies that I have. I have radios. Not everybody's going to have radio. If you need information about what's happening in Asia or what's happening on the East Coast in the capital, we heard that the Capitol was bombed and that all the people in Congress are dead. Like, is that true? You have to find someone who has a radio and can give you accurate information. So
Mm-hmm.
again, you go to somebody who's got a ham radio, and they say, hey, I'm providing daily news updates because I've got radios and I'm talking to people all over the world. And you say, hey, I've got a can of spam for you. If I can get a news update from you, you give them some spam, they give you some news. You're going to have to find a community of people who have produce, who have vegetables, food, who have clean water, and who can protect you in a grid down situation where there's civil unrest and rioting. You're going to want to be in a community where people are coming together who are armed and they're taking care of the community, protecting the community from marauders and thieves, because that kind of activity goes up, and you can't necessarily count on law enforcement to help you.
Yeah.
Because in that kind of a situation, I hate to say this, but if there's no power and there's no phone and there's no internet and people are going crazy and there's civil unrest, cops, firefighters, and paramedics are going to be at home taking care of their families.
Yeah.
They're not going to be showing up to work, especially because after a couple of weeks, a lot of them realize they're not getting paid because their checks won't go through.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're not going to get paid, why would you come to work when you're leaving your family at risk at home? They're not going to come in. There's going to be very, very little fire, EMS, and law enforcement in that kind of a situation. You're going to be on your own. So having a community of people that can protect you and take care of you is huge.
Makes sense. Yeah. Wow. It's sobering. But it's interesting because 100 years ago, this wasn't even that hard to fathom. I mean, the types of things that you're talking about.
Right.
150 years ago, people were prepared. They were equipped.
Yeah.
They knew how
Well,
to
most people
survive.
had a wood stove. They cut wood, put it in the
Yeah.
stove to heat their food. They didn't they didn't have microwaves, for Pete's sake. I mean,
Yeah.
society has changed a lot in the last 100 years, and
Hmm.
we could go back to how things were 100 years ago very
Nobody
quickly.
had Uber Eats. I mean, we've we've gotten ourselves in trouble. The prosperity that we have has resulted in some very poor health and very poor decisions and habits. So I think what you're saying is it's critical because uh, you know people have come to rely so much on conveniences, and it's funny when I travel. I do a lot of driving, and so anytime I go into a new state, I stop at the welcome center and get the paper maps, and then we give them, we keep them, and then we give them to the millennials and Gen Zs, and they look at us like, okay,
What's this?
yeah. But then they complain if they're in a dead zone and their GPS doesn't work, right? So we give them to them anyway, and tell them to keep them in their car, because I mean, I have an Atlas in my car for that very reason, and it's there. I think also there's a lot to be said for even just learning basic navigation and understanding how the interstate system works, how our roads are designed, how surface streets are laid out. If you go on Google Maps, while you still have power, one of the things that you can do is go and just pull up a map of your area and start to get an idea of what's around you. It's amazing how many people have no idea what's around them because they rely on GPS to get from their house to the store. And they don't know that there are side streets, that there are alternative routes. They don't know where they can go if a road is closed. And knowing that could actually save your life. Understanding that most interstate systems have some kind of state highway that typically runs parallel to that road. Just little things like that, that if you take the time to study a map and to learn just the logic of the way that our roads are laid out in this country or in your country, wherever you are.
Can I
That
make a suggestion?
yeah, please do.
Let's say, for example, that it is Monday morning at 7 o'clock local time, wherever you are, and North Korea decides they're going to detonate an EMP over the United States. They detonate an EMP, and the electronic circuits in most people's cars that were built in the last 30 years are instantly fried, and you have highways and interstate freeways that are jammed with cars that don't work. The cars now come to a coast, to a stop, and can't be moved. And you've got thousands of cars blocking the interstates and the off-ramps and the on-ramps and major thoroughfares. How, if you had a car that was working, how would you get from point A to point B? Something to think about.
Yeah.
And if you had a car that was working, it's probably going to be pre 1985-ish, more than likely.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's take everybody out on a high note.
Let's give some hopium to the audience.
Let's give some hopium. If you just click right here, we're going to give you some insider information from our sources. No, I do want to talk about faith for a second, though, because the things that we're talking about, the things that are a possibility, we as Christians, it's so critical that we understand where our hope is, and also the power of prayer. Preparedness and prayer, right? Don't be scared, be prepared, and also trust God. So, can you give us a word of encouragement about how to lean into God and how to leverage your relationship with the Lord and with other believers to pray through situations and to see God's miracles in situations that actually could seem irreversibly and irredeemably bad?
Yes. All right. So you can go to the Bible and you can find places where there was a dire situation where the people were going to die or be inconvenienced if God did not come through with some kind of a miracle. So if you read through Genesis, you'll find this chapter where Pharaoh of Egypt was given a series of dreams, and he was deeply troubled by the dreams. He knew they were important, but he didn't know what they meant. So one of his servants said, "Hey, there's this guy named Joseph. He interprets dreams. Let me bring him to you. Maybe he'll interpret your dreams for you." So Joseph comes, and Pharaoh tells him the dreams. And Joseph says, "Well, the Lord has given us a warning, and here's what the dreams mean. There's going to be a time of 7 years of plenty coming, followed by 7 years of famine. And what the Lord wants you to do is to build grain silos and store up the grain prior to the famine, so that when the famine hits, you've got grain stored up that'll get you through the 7 years of famine." All right. There's a crisis, and God was kind enough and loving enough to warn the Pharaoh in a dream and bring Joseph, who could interpret the dream, and give them instruction how to prepare in advance to avert millions of people dying during the famine. That's the kind of thing God does. God will give us warnings, give us revelation, understanding what is the crisis and how do we avoid that crisis? How do we avert that? What contingency plans do we put in place to prevent people from dying needlessly? I think God does similar things like that today. And I know a lot of people who've been having dreams about cell phone outages and internet outages. It's not just me. I know a lot of people who are getting warnings about these things happening. In the New Testament, Jesus and the disciples had been going through Judea, and they amassed a crowd of people that were following them, thousands of people following them. And it got late in the day, and the disciples said, Lord, it's getting late in the day and the people are hungry. Maybe we should send them home so they can get something to eat. And Jesus said, no, you give them something to eat. And the disciples looked around. They're like, we don't have enough food to feed thousands of people. Where are we going to get the food from? So Jesus said to them, okay, gather up all the food that they have and bring it to me. So they gathered up a few fish and a few loaves of bread, and they brought them to the Lord, and they said, hey, this is what we got. We got a few fish and a few loaves of bread. And they gave them to Jesus. He blessed them. He prayed over them, and he broke them and handed back to the disciples the same number of fish and the same number of loaves of bread that he had received from them. The food had not multiplied. He told the disciples, now go hand it out. So the disciples are thinking, well, we don't have enough food to feed thousands of people. So this is going to be really awkward because we're going to feed like 3 people and then we're going to be out of food. Unless maybe the Lord's going to do some kind of magic trick or supernatural miracle. So in faith, they believed in their minds, in their hearts, they believed that if they handed that food out, it was going to have to multiply. It was just going to have to multiply, or else they wouldn't be able to feed all these people. And Jesus told them, go feed the people. So in faith, believing that the food would multiply, they started handing out what little they had, and it multiplied and it multiplied and it multiplied. And the more they gave out, the more they had. And when they were done, they had 12 baskets of fragments left over. The food multiplied in their hands as they obeyed the Lord's instruction to go and hand it out.
It's really
Jesus
good.
did not multiply the food. The disciples multiplied the food when by faith they handed out what little they had. It just began to multiply.
Wow.
We can do the same thing today. I know a lot of people who have prayed over their food in their freezer, in their pantry, and it has multiplied. They had 1 box of chicken nuggets in their freezer, and the next morning they woke up, they prayed over their food, freezer, because they didn't have any money. And the next day there's 2 boxes of chicken nuggets. They're like, are multiplied by chicken nuggets. I know people who have gone on outreaches, community outreaches, to share the gospel. And they planned for 50 people to show up, and they brought enough hot dogs and chips and food for 50 people, and 150 people showed up. And they're like, I guess we're just going to have to multiply the food. So they prayed over the food, and as they took it out, they had enough to feed everybody. God is still doing miracles today.
Yeah.
And we can learn how to do that by faith. In my Telegram channel, every single day, I post a testimony of some miraculous thing that God did. Sometimes it is healing, physical healing. Sometimes it's emotional healing. Sometimes people pray over a broken car, and God supernaturally repairs the broken car, or the broken air conditioning unit, or the broken computer. God is still doing supernatural miracles. And if we get into a time of crisis, I think God is going to do some crazy miracles. I think people who live in a neighborhood where there is no internet, I think there are people who are going to, by faith, open up their laptop computer and send out an email to somebody where nobody else in the neighborhood has internet. There's going to be a supernatural hotspot at their house where they have internet and nobody around them does. I believe there's people who are going to have cell phone service in a town where nobody else has cell phone service. I believe there are going to be people who have power in their house when the power grid for miles around is down. I have a friend who had a dream that basically that was the message of the dream, is that in this dream, my friend saw a blacked out neighborhood, but 3 houses had power, and there was an angel standing on top of one of the houses, and it was reaching up to this power grid, and it was bringing power into these 3 houses supernaturally. Uh, the I as much as I'm
Mhm.
concerned that the days ahead could be filled with difficulty, this is a time when the saints of God need to arise and have the faith to work miracles. Because even if you're one of those preppers who is able to put away enough food and water and ammunition, and you have your solar panels and you've got your backup power and you have your kerosene, your propane, and everything else, and you're ready to go, you are at some point going to run out of stuff. You're going to have a situation that is you cannot resolve. Your wife or child is going to become deathly ill and you're not going to be able to treat them, and the hospitals are going to be closed, and you're going to have no choice but to pray over that person and
Mhm.
pray that God supernaturally heals them.
It's good.
This is a time when right now we should be practicing and exercising our faith so that if a time of difficulty comes, we're prepared to work miracles. That is what God wants us to know. Yes, you can be prepared. Yes, you should put aside some water, some food. You should maybe pick up a handheld radio and maybe consider talking to your neighbors with radios and practicing prior to the grid going down. But you should absolutely be practicing and exercising your faith so that if you need to work a miracle, you can do that. Because it's a lot easier to get your faith built up prior to the crisis than
Mhm.
during a crisis when you're like, oh no, if I don't know how, I've never done this before, and if it doesn't
Yeah.
work,
Yeah.
that's not the time to learn how to work miracles. Much easier to do it when
Yeah.
someone's life is not on the line.
That's encouraging. I want to show everybody your Telegram channel. It's
Okay.
praying_medic on Telegram. You've got about 130 some thousand followers. So that's what it looks like. That's the handle.
Praying
And
underscore medic.
and I think you can probably scan that QR code if you want. Yeah. But that's his Telegram channel. Um, and I always use this time to say that neither Dave nor I will ever direct message people on social media. We're definitely not trying to sell anybody uh, um, crypto.
Crypto.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
Block,
also,
block and report.
yeah, block and report. And then also, typically, if you try to message, especially the Facebook page for Mary Grace Media, you're not going to get a reply. It's kind of janky, and also I don't have time. Dave doesn't have time to do direct messages on all of these platforms, and so it's really better just to email. So you can go to my website. You can contact me through the website. You can send an email, info@marygracemedia.com. And that way it's just all in one place. And if you do send an email, just try to keep it brief, because it can kind of add up. So I do like to reply if it's not, paragraphs and paragraphs. And I think, Dave can speak for himself, but he does have an email address and a contact form on his website as well. So that's a good way to
Correct.
get in touch. Yeah. Um,
Prayingmedic.com or prayingmedic.org are my two websites. And there's contact pages on both of them. Hit the contact tab, send me an email, whether it's a prayer request or a question, and I will
yeah.
respond to your email within 48 hours.
Excellent. And another thing too, you mentioned last time that Denise, your wife, is going to be uh, starting to promote her art soon. And I trust that you're going to start sharing
I
her
will.
her Instagram and her website when she's ready to do that. I know you
We will
guys
do that.
stay busy. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, because people are excited about that. uh,
Me too.
yeah, and she's such a good artist, so we want to make sure that we get that out as soon as it's available. Okay, I think this is a good place to wind down. I want to remind everybody again that I am going to be on the X Spaces tomorrow night with Kimmy, and it's Kim Magagal 2 on her channel at 8 p.m. Eastern. And I don't foresee this going 7 hours like the last space that Dave did, but I'm already tired just thinking about it. But
I'll
we're going
pray
to talk
for you.
about Yeah, we're going to talk about information war, and that's something that I really think a lot about, and hopefully it will be helpful for you. And please share it. Please get the information out. I don't have a huge Twitter account because, alas, my original account is still on lockdown, and one day maybe it will be released. But if you can find me at Mary Grace TV on X. That's my backup account that I'm running right now, Mary Grace TV on X. And if you're on my mailing list, all of those links are really accessible. When you get an email from me, you just click the link and it takes you to my channel. So that's the best way to do that. And to get on my mailing list, easy. Just go to marygracemedia.com and join the mailing list. So Dave Hayes, Praying Medic, it's just been fantastic to have you here as always. And we will be back, everybody, for another conversation for sure on this channel and on whatever channel you're watching. And also remember that tomorrow I'm going to have a very interesting conversation with Ivan Raiklin talking about his deep state hit list and how he has put together a plan to go after the perpetrators of Russiagate, Crossfire Hurricane, all of the deep state dirty actors that are treasonous. So it's going to be really interesting. Hopefully, you can be here 1 p.m. Eastern on all of the channels that I broadcast on. So have a great day, everybody. Get outside, touch some grass, um, look at the sky, and put your phone down for a while and talk to God. Take care.